Hannah had no idea how it had all gone so wrong. It started with her toddler, Ellie, waking up with a fever, again. After an hour of arguing with a 3-year-old over medicine, and a spilled bowl of Cheerios all over the kitchen floor, Hannah had finally managed to get Ellie dressed and out the door. But by the time they reached the car, the battery was dead. Of course, it had to be today, the one day she was desperate to make it to her blind date on time. She'd tried calling a cab, but it was going to take another 20 minutes for one to arrive. So, she made a snap decision: she would walk to the restaurant. It was only a mile or so, and she needed to clear her head anyway. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. By the time she reached the park near the restaurant, the sky had gone dark with clouds, and the first raindrop splattered across her cheek. Then, without warning, the heavens opened up, and a torrential downpour soaked her from head to toe. The worst part, she was in the middle of the park, and she had no umbrella. So, she did what any reasonable person would do in her position: she ran. She dodged puddles, but it didn't matter. Her shoes were already soaked through. She stumbled over uneven ground, trying to stay upright while her purse bounced wildly against her side. And then, as if the universe were making a point, she slipped on a patch of wet grass, sending her tumbling into a large, muddy puddle. It was like a scene straight out of a slapstick comedy, but there was nothing funny about it when you were wearing white jeans and a brand new blouse. By the time she reached the restaurant, her hair was a wild, dripping mess, and her outfit was completely ruined. The mud had splattered all over her legs and arms. She tried to brush herself off, but it was hopeless. When she walked through the door, the hostess glanced at her in mild shock, but, to her credit, she didn't comment on the state of Hannah's appearance. She gave a sympathetic smile and led her to a table at the back. And there, sitting in a perfectly tailored suit, was Nathan Campbell, the man she was supposed to impress. His eyes swept over her, clearly surprised. But instead of judgment, there was a flicker of something else. Curiosity, sympathy, it was hard to tell. Hannah forced a smile and cleared her throat. "I'm sorry, I know this looks ridiculous." Nathan just stared at her for a moment, then sighed, a hint of a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It's fine," he said, though his voice seemed strained. "Let's just get this over with, shall we?" But there was something in his eyes now, something softer. Something that told Hannah that maybe, just maybe, this date might turn out to be more than she expected. Hannah sat down across from Nathan, her legs stiff from the awkward walk through the restaurant. She tried to avoid looking at her reflection in the glossy table surface, her hair clinging to her face, her clothes clumped together in muddy patches. There was nothing graceful about the way she looked, and she felt the sting of embarrassment creeping into her chest. Nathan, on the other hand, was poised and immaculate in his dark suit, his tie perfectly knotted. His hands rested on the table, fingers steepled, as though he was ready to conduct a business meeting rather than go on a casual dinner date. His polished appearance only emphasized how out of place she felt. The waiter arrived and handed them the menus, but Nathan barely glanced at it before placing it aside. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was an uncomfortable silence between them. "So, what do you do?" she asked, trying to fill the space, her voice cracking a little more than she intended. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with an unreadable expression. "I'm the CEO of a tech company," he said, voice steady. "I mostly deal with strategy, finances, and long-term plans. Not exactly the most exciting job for a dinner conversation." Hannah blinked, surprised. He didn't look like the kind of man who would be in the tech industry. He seemed like the kind of person who would be into high finance or managing multi-million-dollar mergers. Tech companies were supposed to be filled with hoodie-wearing, caffeine-fueled engineers, not sleek corporate figures like him. "Oh, wow, that sounds intense." She laughed, though it came out awkwardly, and she immediately regretted it. "I mean, my job is nothing like that. I'm just a single mom, trying to keep everything together." Nathan's eyes softened at that. "I can't imagine how difficult that must be," he said, his tone quieter now, more genuine. "Balancing everything must feel like you're constantly running on empty." Hannah chuckled, though it was bittersweet. "You have no idea. Between my job, taking care of Ellie, and, well, trying to have a life outside of it all, I sometimes wonder how I get through the day." She paused, suddenly feeling a little exposed. Talking about her struggles felt both cathartic and uncomfortable. Most people she met didn't want to hear about the messiness of life, especially someone like Nathan, who seemed to have it all together. But to her surprise, Nathan didn't look repulsed or uncomfortable. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "I get it," he said. "I don't have kids, but the pressure of trying to run a company and maintain a public image, it's exhausting. You're always putting on a mask, always trying to be perfect. But sometimes, it's the cracks that make you, well, human." There was a shift in the air between them, something that hadn't been there before. Nathan's words felt different, more sincere, and it caught Hannah off guard. She wasn't used to someone acknowledging the reality of life instead of pretending everything was picture perfect. "I guess that's true," she said, her voice softening. "I'm not perfect, not even close." Nathan smiled, but it wasn't the usual confident CEO smile, it was something warmer, more real. "You don't have to be perfect," he said. "Honestly, it's kind of refreshing to see someone who's just honest." Hannah felt a blush creep up her neck. She hadn't expected to hear that tonight, certainly not from someone like Nathan. But it made her feel something she hadn't in a long time, a sense of possibility. Maybe this blind date wasn't a disaster after all. Maybe it was the beginning of something unexpected. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to relax, letting the tension melt away. Maybe this was exactly what she needed, a reminder that real connections were made through the messes, the imperfections, and the things you couldn't control. The meal had progressed in a way Hannah hadn't anticipated. Where she'd first felt like an intruder in a world of pristine perfection, she now found herself settling into a conversation with Nathan that was strangely easy, despite the earlier awkwardness. The tension between them had dissipated, replaced by something more comfortable. More real. As the waiter cleared their plates and brought dessert, chocolate mousse and a bottle of chilled white wine, Hannah couldn't help but notice how different Nathan seemed now. Gone was the cool, aloof CEO from the beginning of the evening. Instead, he was leaning forward slightly, engaging with her, his eyes no longer flicking to his phone every few minutes. He seemed genuinely present, as if the muddy, disheveled woman across from him was someone he wanted to know, not just someone he was tolerating. "So, tell me more about your daughter," Nathan said, taking a sip of his wine. "You said her name is Ellie." Hannah's face softened at the mention of her daughter. She spoke about Ellie the way any mother did, proudly, with affection, but also with a slight exhaustion in her voice. "Yeah, Ellie, she's 3, and full of energy. Honestly, some days I feel like she's running the show." She chuckled softly, then added, "I never imagined it would be this hard, you know. Being a mom, I love it, but it's not exactly the fairy tale I imagined." Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I get that, the pressure to always be on, always have it together, it's a lot. I imagine it's harder when you're doing it alone." Hannah was surprised by his insight. Most people would say the obvious, it must be hard, being a single mom. But Nathan's comment cut deeper, acknowledging not just the challenge of being a single mother, but the emotional and mental toll it took to keep up appearances, to hold it all together, day after day. "I'm not always sure I'm doing it right," she confessed, her voice quieter now. "There's this constant feeling of juggling, work, Ellie, social life, trying to date. And at the end of the day, I'm left wondering if I'm doing enough, if I'm enough." Nathan set his glass down, his gaze steady. You're doing more than enough. The fact that you're here tonight says a lot. Most people would have canceled. I don't think I'd have had the guts to show up looking the way you did earlier, but you came. And that's something." His words made her pause. She wasn't used to being seen like this, really seen. Not just the version of herself that was carefully curated for the world, but the messy, tired, overwhelmed version. Nathan wasn't judging her, he wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was simply acknowledging the truth. They both fell into a comfortable silence, the weight of the conversation lingering between them. Hannah couldn't quite put her finger on why, but something about Nathan's genuine nature made her feel like maybe she wasn't so alone in this after all. Maybe there were people who understood, who saw beyond the imperfections and the chaos. As dessert was cleared away, Nathan stood and offered her his arm. "Shall we?" "Yeah," Hannah replied, a little breathlessly. "I think I'd like that." They walked outside together into the cool evening, the city lights casting a soft glow over the street. Nathan turned to her with a smile, but this time it wasn't the kind of smile that suggested he was just being polite. It was warm, inviting. "You know, I almost left," he admitted, his voice a little quieter. "When you walked in, I thought, this isn't going to work." But I'm glad I stayed. I'm glad you stayed. Hannah met his eyes and, for the first time in what felt like ages, felt a flutter of hope, hope that maybe, just maybe, things didn't have to be perfect to be worth it. Yeah, me too, she said, a soft smile playing on her lips. Nathan grinned, looking more relaxed than he had all evening. How about a second date? No mud this time, I promise. Hannah laughed, a genuine laugh that felt free and unburdened. Deal. No mud, but I can't promise I won't be late. That's kind of my thing. Nathan chuckled, stepping closer. I can handle that. They walked down the street together, their conversation easy and flowing. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Hannah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, something good was finally starting to happen.